I never believed in skinwalkers until I came face to face with one. Growing up, my family always took a camping trip to the same remote spot in the mountains every summer. It was a tradition that I loved, filled with stories around the campfire, fishing in the lake, and hiking through the dense forest. This year was no different, except that my parents couldn't make it. So I decided to go alone for the first time. I arrived at our usual campsite just before dusk. The air was crisp, and the forest was alive with the sounds of nature. I set up my tent, started a fire, and settled in for a quiet evening. As the darkness enveloped the forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I dismissed it as nerves from being alone and focused on the comforting crackle of the fire. Around midnight, I heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. I shone my flashlight into the darkness, expecting to see a deer or a raccoon, but there was nothing. The rustling stopped, and I returned to my spot by the fire, a bit on edge but still determined to enjoy my night. That's when I heard it. A low, guttural growl, almost too human to be an animal. I stood up, my heart pounding, and scanned the darkness with my flashlight. My light caught something moving between the trees, too fast to make out clearly. The growling grew louder, and I realized it was circling me. I grabbed a large stick from the firewood pile, brandishing it as a makeshift weapon. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The growling stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, from the darkness, I heard my own voice mimicking my question. "Who's there?" I froze. It was my voice, but distorted, twisted. My grip tightened on the stick as I tried to figure out what was happening. The voice came again, this time closer. "Who's there?" Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the flickering light of the fire. It looked like a man, but something was horribly wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements unnatural like a puppet on strings. And its eyes, dark, empty voids, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. "Who's there?" it repeated, its mouth forming the words in a grotesque parody of speech. I realized then that this was no human. This was a skinwalker, a creature from Native American legend that could mimic voices and take on human form to lure its prey. I backed away slowly, keeping the stick between me and the creature. It took a step closer, its gaze never leaving mine. "Stay back!" I shouted, but it only seemed to delight in my fear, its twisted smile widening. In a desperate move, I grabbed a burning log from the fire and thrust it toward the skinwalker. It recoiled, letting out a shriek that pierced the night. Taking advantage of its momentary retreat, I turned and ran into the forest, my flashlight bouncing wildly in the darkness. I ran blindly, branches slashing at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. Behind me, I could hear the skinwalker crashing through the underbrush, its distorted voice calling out, "Who's there?" I stumbled upon a small cave and ducked inside, hoping the darkness would hide me. I switched off my flashlight and pressed myself against the cold stone, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. The forest fell silent again, and I prayed the creature had lost my trail. Minutes felt like hours as I sat in the cave, every sound amplified by my fear. Then, from the entrance, I heard my own voice once more. "Who's there?" It was close, too close. I held my breath, not daring to move. The skinwalker stepped into the cave, its silhouette blocking out the moonlight. It sniffed the air, searching. I could see its eyes glinting in the darkness, scanning the cave for any sign of me. Just as it seemed it would find me, a distant howl echoed through the forest, drawing its attention. The skinwalker hesitated, then turned and slipped back into the night. I waited until the first light of dawn before I dared to move. Exhausted and terrified, I made my way back to my campsite, gathered my things, and left. I never returned to that spot in the mountains. The skinwalker had shown me that some legends are terrifyingly real. Even now, I sometimes hear my own voice in the night, whispering from the shadows, "Who's there?" And I know that somewhere, the skinwalker is still out there, watching, waiting.